Welcome to Israel Now News. I'm Rebekah Roberts.
And I'm Yochanan Elrom.
In our top story, the Jewish state achieved its goals just 12 days into the war with Iran. Since launching attacks on Iran's nuclear weapons program on June 13th, Israelis were ordered to shelter in place. Schools, places of work, and entertainment were shuttered. Israelis were instructed to stay near bomb shelters as Iran fired over 500 ballistic missiles and launched more than 1,000 drones on major population centers within the Jewish state. 28 people were killed in Israel, and thousands were wounded in the devastating attacks. Just 12 days into Operation Rising Lion, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu announced that Israel had removed an immediate existential threat on two fronts, one in the nuclear domain and the other in the field of ballistic missiles. Netanyahu released a statement saying Israel achieved a monumental and historic success during Operation Rising Lion and placed itself in line with the great powers of the world.
Members of the Persian Jewish community outside of Iran remain worried for their family members still trapped inside the country. They are concerned that after losing the war, the Ayatollah will retaliate against the Jewish people. Iranian police detained members of the local Jewish community for suspected ties to Israel. Iranian dissidents living abroad say their relatives have gone into hiding. One Iranian defector told Israel's Ynet News, "The regime will stop at nothing to instill deep fear in the Jewish community. They will severely punish anyone they suspect of collaborating with Israel. The entire Persian Jewish community is a target of the regime." It's estimated that approximately 9,000 Jews still live in Iran, making it home to one of the largest and oldest Jewish communities in the Middle East outside of Israel. Jewish presence in ancient Persia dates back more than 2,700 years and is documented in the biblical books of Daniel, Nehemiah, Ezra, Isaiah, Esther, and Chronicles. There was a mass exodus of Iranian Jews following the Islamic Revolution in 1979. Jews who were unable or unwilling to leave were forced to watch their freedoms erode. Today, Jews in Iran live as dhimmis, second-class citizens, trapped under a dangerous Shiite theocracy. Iranian Jews are praying for freedom from the radical Islamic Republic after 46 years of living in oppression and fear.
The son of the late Shah of Iran, Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi, is calling for regime change in the Islamic Republic. The Shah and his family were forced to flee Iran after the Islamic Revolution in 1979. From exile, Reza Pahlavi became known as the leading force behind Iran's pro-democracy movement. He has worked tirelessly to organize the resistance and to raise global awareness about the plight of the Iranian people under the oppressive mullah's regime. Pahlavi has visited the Jewish state and worked with Israeli officials to support the Iranian people while opposing the rule of the Ayatollahs. Since the start of Operation Rising Lion, Pahlavi's strong connections to the evangelical Christian community and to Israel have come to light. Last week, Pahlavi attended several meetings hosted by the Israel Allies Foundation, where he briefed members of the U.S. Congress and the European Parliament on his plans to restore democracy to Iran.
Israeli leaders from across the political spectrum came together to thank the United States for attacking Iran's nuclear weapons facilities. This after U.S. President Donald Trump announced that America had carried out the largest B-2 bombing raid in history against Iran's rogue nuclear weapons infrastructure. U.S. Air Force pilots flew directly from the state of Missouri to drop 14 bunker-buster bombs on nuclear sites at Natanz and Fordow. More than 125 U.S. aircraft participated in Operation Midnight Hammer, including B-2 stealth bombers, fighter jets, refueling planes, and surveillance aircraft. Shortly before American warplanes entered Iranian airspace, a U.S. Navy submarine launched more than 24 Tomahawk cruise missiles on the nuclear complex at Isfahan. Within just 25 minutes, American planes dropped 75 precision-guided munitions on Iran's dangerous nuclear weapons sites and began their journey home. President Trump praised the mission as a historic moment for the United States, for Israel, and for the world. Members of the Knesset congratulated the president for his decisive action. Israelis welcomed America's alliance with the Jewish state over the forces of Islamic tyranny. Rebekah has more on that.
Yes, Yochanan, Israelis celebrated the news of America's attack on Iran by decorating the holy city of Jerusalem in red, white, and blue. The ancient walls surrounding the old city were illuminated with images of American and Israeli flags, and full-size billboards were erected along Israeli highways, thanking President Trump. Speaker of the Israeli Knesset, Amir Ohana, hosted a special ceremony in front of Israel's parliament, saying, on behalf of the Knesset, which represents all citizens of Israel, I would like to thank President Trump for his courageous and unparalleled decision. He said today will be remembered as the day that the United States saved the world from the enormous danger of weapons of mass destruction in the hands of the Ayatollah's regime.
The people of Iran continue their courageous battle for access to free information. The fanatic Islamic regime imposed a nationwide internet blackout, limiting all media to state-controlled television. We reported last week that Elon Musk repositioned Starlink satellites to provide internet access to the Iranian people. Unfortunately, most Iranians lack the equipment to connect to Starlink. Members of the resistance have been working to bring in key pieces of hardware required to access Starlink. The radical Shiite regime has cracked down on these smuggling rings and has threatened to arrest anyone who downloads the Starlink application. There are currently about 20,000 active Starlink satellites over Iran, posing a serious threat to the Ayatollah's narrative by offering the people uncensored access to information from around the world.
The United States Supreme Court has unanimously ruled to uphold the Justice for Victims of Terrorism Act. This law is an expansion of the 1993 Anti-Terrorism Act, which empowers American citizens injured in terrorist attacks overseas to sue foreign entities for damages in U.S. court. This is especially relevant to Americans targeted in Israel by Palestinian terror groups. Ahmad Sha'ari from the Foundation of Defense for Democracies praised the High Court's ruling. He said the Palestinian Liberation Organization and the Palestinian Authority are no longer shielded from accountability for incentivizing the killing of Americans in Israel through their pay-to-slay policy.
Israel's Minister of Diaspora Affairs has issued an urgent call to Jews living in the United Kingdom and Belgium to leave immediately. Amichai Shikli said Belgium and the UK have fallen and face being conquered by Islamists. He warned that radical Islamist elements within these countries have compromised the security and cultural fabric of the European societies, leaving the Jewish communities increasingly vulnerable and unprotected. Shikli lamented the failure of multiculturalism in Europe, which was meant to foster inclusion and mutual respect, but only enable the empowerment of extremist ideologies. He said European governments are now controlled by Islamists and are submissive. He urged Jews living in the UK and Belgium to leave.
A mass exodus of Israelis have made their way home through Egypt and Jordan, just as their forefathers did thousands of years ago. Jews read the Torah, or the 5 books of Moses, on a weekly cycle. And last week, Jews around the world read Numbers, chapters 13 through 15. These passages describe the Israelites' journey to the land of milk and honey and holds the message of God's eternal covenant with the people and the land of Israel. In the days following Operation Rising Lion, more than 39,000 Israelis entered through land border crossings in neighboring Arab states. Many people drew parallels between the Torah portion and the masses of Israelis coming home on epic journeys through the deserts of Egypt and Jordan.
The Israel Defense Forces found evidence that Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps was preparing to transfer $50 million in weapons to Hamas in Gaza. The IDF announced that it discovered internal Hamas communications proving that the Iranian military was working to deliver weapons to Palestinian terror groups throughout the Jewish state. The commander of the IRGC's Quds force in charge of the Palestine Corps was recently killed in airstrikes in Gaza. His death revealed the close cooperation between Iran, Hamas, and other Palestinian terror groups. The IDF released a statement saying it will continue to act against any attempt by the Iranian regime to arm and fund the terrorist organizations that threaten the State of Israel and its citizens. That concludes the news portion of our show. Stay tuned for Ask the Source with Josh Reinstein.
Hello and welcome to Ask the Source. I'm your host Josh Reinstein, and we're here in our beautiful studio in Jerusalem. My guest today is member of Knesset Sharren Haskel. She's the Deputy Foreign Minister of the State of Israel. Sharren, thank you for being on the show.
It's a pleasure. Thanks for inviting me.
Well, we're in week 2 of the big war. Things seem to be going really well. How do you see it from your perspective?
Wow, I think that obviously the Prime Minister Netanyahu and the government were able to put on the table very sophisticated plans. Our security forces have done incredible professional work in accuracy. We were able to destroy most of their air defense system. And so once we got quite a lot of control over the Iranian sky, we were able to eliminate or start to eliminate the bank of targets of the nuclear military program and the ballistic missile program, the double existential threat that was just above our head.
What's amazing is that Iran is the size of 2 Texases.
Yeah.
Yet little Israel was able to get complete air superiority in 2 days. How do you explain that?
It just the incredible work of our security forces, our Air Force and the IDF, the professional, the accuracy, the planning as well. Of this military operation have been top-notch, and I think that's the reputation of the State of Israel in terms of defense, of intelligence, of operations. You know, knock on wood, obviously. Look, this is a country who's 75 times bigger than Israel. This is 9 times the population of the State of Israel. And we've been fighting this enemy for a long time. I mean, we had not just direct attack from Iran, but, you know, the 7th of October with its proxies through Hezbollah, through the Houthis, through Hamas itself. It's been very difficult, but one after the other, once we were able to neutralize quite a few of their proxies, then now we have to deal with the tumor, with the head of the snake.
The big news coming out from last week was America joined in and took out the Fordow nuclear base, as well as some of the other bases around there. How important is it that America has joined Israel in this battle?
First of all, with Trump's looking after the American interest, but more so after humanity, that was a huge moment where, when you identify the leader of the free world, that's how it looks like. I think that setting such an example, not just of talking, not just setting red lines, not just saying don't, but acting in defense of the entire humanity, preventing one of the most horrible, aggressive and violent enemies of the world, and preventing from them a nuclear weapon on the last minute. This was a moment of, a clear moral clarity of a leader.
Without the threat of Iran, Israel's going to enter into a period of peace and prosperity that I don't think the country ever imagined. If you just look at the dollar shekel rate, the dollar is weakening to the shekel during the war. Our stock market just had the best week it's ever had in the last 5 years during war. Are world leaders understanding that this is a time when Israel's about to rise? Are people lining up to be friends with Israel again? Are people starting to support Israel, or is it just business as usual?
I think that some of the leaders have woken up and some are continuing the same kind of discourse. I don't think all of them understand what a critical time and what a point in history it is. How we need much more Churchills and fewer less Chamberlains in what resulted in the Second World War and the outcomes. But people are starting to realize, the public understand it better. They understand what a huge risk it is, how Iran deceived the international community, how easy it was to deceive those leaders who called for diplomatic solutions, and we wanted a diplomatic solution too. But that was only a mask and a lie that Iran portrayed in order to reach the nuclear military program and to advance their ballistic missile program. The fact is that just during the last 3 months, while negotiating with the United States, if they had enough material, for nuclear bombs, so that the estimation was about 6 of them, just in the last 3 months, they've accelerated to another 3. Okay? Those are very large numbers. So you understand those intentions. And so this was Israel working on the last minute, the 11th hour, to eliminate a double existential threat over our children, over our nation, and our communities.
Deputy Minister, there are literally tens of millions of people watching this show. What message do you have for our viewing audience?
My message is, I think you understand what critical time, historical time, times that were spoken in the Bible that are unraveling just in front of us. I call all of you not to stay silent, to keep on speaking out. Please keep your prayers. Continue to pray for our people, for our country, but it is also important to speak out against our enemies who are trying to destroy the way that we live today.
Thank you, Deputy Minister, for being on the show. And thank you for tuning in to Ask the Source. I'm your host, Josh Reinstein. Now back to the studio.
And now the truth from Zion.
In 2005, Israel withdrew completely from the Gaza Strip. The hope was that this disengagement would create peace with the Palestinians, but instead, it led to death and destruction.
Israel's disengagement from Gaza was a major mistake and ultimately led to the genocide we experienced on October 7th. Every time Israel relinquishes land in the false attempt for peace, terror elements move in, and it leads to more war.
The Israeli government's intention was to create a separation between the Jewish and Arab populations in the area after years of terror attacks and violence. The idea of disengagement proved to be both controversial and divisive. Public opinion in the country was split. The left hoped that removing Jews from Gaza would foster stability in the region and end terrorist attacks that were destroying the lives of innocent Israelis, and that a Palestinian-only territory would be a clear signal to the international community of Israel's commitment to peace. However, the right was convinced that the vacuum created by expelled Jewish families would be filled by radical Islamists, and that terror attacks would increase, not decrease. On August 15, 2005, on the orders of then Prime Minister Ariel Sharon, 9,000 Israeli citizens in 25 communities were forcibly removed from their homes in what was known as Gush Katif, and 4 additional Jewish communities were uprooted from their ancestral homeland in Samaria. The move was met with skepticism, anger, and resentment from families who were forced to start their lives over, somewhere new. By September 22nd, just 5 weeks later, the wide-scale eviction was completed. Israel no longer controlled the Gaza Strip that it had liberated in the 1967 Six-Day War. Jewish residents were forcefully removed. Jewish homes were bulldozed. Cemeteries were dug up and relocated. The military withdrew. and all signs of Jewish life in Gaza disappeared. The Fatah Party of the Palestinian Authority became the governing body of Gaza, but not for long. Just 2 years later, in 2007, Gaza residents voted to replace Fatah with the political wing of Hamas. To make sure Fatah got the message, the military wing of Hamas staged a bloody coup, killing hundreds of Fatah officials and party members. The Hamas terror organization was now the new ruler of the Gaza Strip. This Palestinian terror group was now in complete control of the coastal enclave. It soon began firing thousands of rockets and mortar shells into southern Israeli towns and villages. Their intention was to terrorize and destabilize the lives of hundreds of thousands of Israeli citizens living on the Mediterranean coast and in the Negev desert. In the 3 years before the disengagement, 702 rockets were launched into Israel. By 2006, only a year after Israel removed its presence from the Gaza Strip, the number of projectiles fired into Israel almost doubled to 1,247. Some political observers said this was a clear display that the Palestinians did not want peace with Israel. Others argued that armed resistance was a great tool for the Palestinians to use, since it had already forced Israel to leave the Gaza Strip. Palestinian factions in Gaza continued to fire rockets at Israelis in hopes of pushing them out of the land of Israel entirely, or at least pressuring Israel into agreeing to their terrorist demands. These periodic attacks from Hamas were met by Israeli defensive operations, followed by ceasefires, which only allowed Hamas to regroup and restock their rocket supplies and ammunition. Israel believed this scenario was business as usual, but that it could manage these sporadic attacks. That flawed military strategy came crashing down on October 7, 2023, when Hamas launched its genocidal attack, slaughtering 1,200 innocent men, women, and children, and taking 250 hostages into Gaza. As we reflect on the events of 2005, it is clear that while Israel made significant sacrifices for peace, its efforts were in vain. The disengagement from Gaza was met with hostility and violence from terrorist groups like Hamas and the Palestinian Islamic Jihad. The results of that failed plan ended the idea of land for peace for most Israelis. As Israel now finds itself in yet another defensive war with genocidal terrorists, it must not forget that the policy of appeasement never works, certainly not in the volatile Middle East. Up next, the ICEJ report from the International Christian Embassy, Jerusalem.
Since Israel was brutally attacked by Hamas on October 7th of last year, the demand for mental health care in Israel has surged. This is especially true for those suffering with some form of post-traumatic stress. Israeli experts are estimating that 1 in 3 individuals impacted by the conflict will grapple with trauma symptoms for years to come.
Since 1980, the International Christian Embassy Jerusalem has been a voice of Christian support for Israel and connected the global church to the land of the Bible. Headquartered in Jerusalem, the ICEJ has taken action to stand with Israel by caring for Holocaust survivors, helping Jewish families return home to Israel, providing bomb shelters, fighting anti-Semitism around the world, and by inviting Christians to discover Israel for themselves.
Over the past year, the Christian Embassy has responded to this urgent need by supporting a variety of trauma therapy programs, most notably for emergency first responders and for children. One such initiative is a new recovery home we funded in the Galilee that serves as a haven for those experiencing acute trauma symptoms. The home is now self-supporting and uses creative therapy methods to help people find their balance in life more quickly. Elsewhere, we have sponsored therapeutic horseback riding sessions, as well as therapeutic group retreats for emergency and medical first response teams. The ICEJ recently bought 2 therapy horses, which service many recovering youths and have proven quite successful. A young boy named Erez was held hostage in Gaza for 50 days and managed to survive mentally by remembering his times riding his favorite horse. After his release, Erez was so glad to be back on a horse again. The ICEJ also sponsored special training courses for medical professionals dealing with severely injured patients and Jewish-Arab tensions in the workplace. We also helped to fund renovations of a new trauma recovery center in Jerusalem, as well as provided large protected rooms for group therapy sessions in a resilience center in the south of Israel. These are just some of the ways the Christian Embassy has been helping Israelis overcome the trauma of this difficult war.
After Hamas brutally attacked Israel on October the 7th, 2023, the ICEJ has been actively standing with Israel and her people through advocacy and urgently needed aid projects. Now is the time for Christians to turn their love for Israel and the Jewish people into real action as never before. Your donation will help deliver bomb shelters to at-risk areas, provide necessary supplies for first responders, support affected citizens with trauma care, and will eventually help rebuild these devastated communities. Visit ICEJUSA.tv to donate online or call 1-800-910-6355 and give your generous gift today.
That's all for this edition of Israel Now News. I'm Rebekah Roberts.
And I'm Yochanan Elrom, reporting from our studio in Jerusalem. Join us again next week for all of your Israel updates.